that dear younger me thought. What do you think about that? What kind of goes through your mind? It's kind of an interesting message in that song. What do you think? I think that most people in this room, young and old alike, have already had a time where if you were given the opportunity to go back and talk to your younger self and give them some advice, you would probably do it. Am I right? All right. The big question is, would you have listened? About a month ago, I decided to cut down a tree, that dead branch out of my tree in the backyard, a big oak tree. I had a big oak tree. There was a big dead branch hanging there. And Cindy had said, I think we need to get rid of that big dead branch. And so I got up in that tree, and I figured it all out, how that tree limb was going to fall. And unfortunately, it did not fall like I thought it was going to fall. And somehow it sprung back, and on its way down to the ground, it landed on my big toe, my left big toe. And yes, it hurt just as bad as you'd think it would. And it just went on down to the ground. I'm really thankful it didn't knock me out of the tree, but it is what it is. As a matter of fact, I'm not getting into Ecclesiastes yet, but I did find that there is a verse in Ecclesiastes 10:9, whoever splits log may be endangered by them. It is true. Whoever cuts dead branches out of a tree may be endangered by them. And it hurt. I went to the urgent care, and they confirmed that I had broke my toe in 2 places and that I had to have 8 stitches to repair the damage that was done to my toe. That was one expensive dead branch. Unfortunately, it's healing up, and I can get my shoe back on again, my left shoe back on again. And Cindy, my wife, she thinks that I should stay out of trees. I just think I need steel-toed shoes. No problem there. But if I could, a month ago, as soon as it happened, I thought, oh man, I should have. Have you ever done that? I should have done this. I played the should have game, and I couldn't. There was nothing could do. The damage is already done. It was too late. Now, do-overs sound really great. To be able to do something over again sounds really great, but for the most part, that is just not how life works, is it? Life happens, we live, we learn, and then life goes on. And actually, in some cases, our mistakes can even actually make us a better person, right? If we learn and from that. Well, with this idea of a do-over, which we get from reading the book of Ecclesiastes, I asked a few folks a couple weeks ago if they would help me out and answer a couple of questions at time to reflect back on their life. And you heard Jim's testimony. You're going to hear a few more. And we couldn't get everybody's testimony, but I took notes of what everybody said. And as a matter of fact, if you're in this room and you help me out with this, would you raise your hand? We have a few. There are a lot of them in their first service. Shall we go? Yeah, thank you. And there's a lot of wisdom in this room and in our church family. And it's really important that listen to each other and help each other along. I mean, that's what we're here for, to help each other pursue God's purposes in our life. And it's good to have all this wisdom. And it was really interesting to put them together. And here's some things that they came up with. The wise folks in this church said if they could have life to do over, or if they could give some good advice to somebody younger. First of all, there were several of them that said, I would have accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior at an earlier age. They said, many said, I'd spend more time and energy on knowing God's Word and living His way. They spend more time with quality time with family. One said, I wish I'd listened better to my grandparents' stories. And one said, spend the resources God has given me more wisely. To be more patient with my children, to be more attentive to my spouse. A couple had mentioned that they would like to have they would have pursued a different career that would allow them more time with their family, or a career that would allow them to be more helpful to people. So that was cool. Learn to say no to things that take away from your family and your faith. One said, slow down and be young. There's plenty of time to grow up. Enjoy each day. Keep the big picture in focus every day. Be honest and upfront with people always. Know the right thing to do and do it. Be willing to work hard. Be dependable. Commit yourself to loving God and loving others and model what that looks like. When you make a mistake, admit it and move on in the right direction. And this is the last one I'll share. There are several more, but this last one I'll share. I like, it said, always say, I love you. When a family member leaves the house or ends a phone call or goes to bed, it may be the last words you say or that they hear. great advice, a lot of wisdom, a lot of things that we learn from life. We have some very wise folks in our family. Well, this month we're going to take a look at Solomon's thoughts. He looked back on his life and maybe what he would do over, or maybe just his thoughts of what life was really like for him. And so we're going to look at that now. So if you have your Bible or if you have your phone, you want to get it out and look at Ecclesiastes and read along. We have it on the screen for those of you who don't. But it says, so we're going to look at this and check out how he starts the book of Ecclesiastes, this look back on his life. So here we go. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 1. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. I'm talking about Solomon. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utter meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Generations come, generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north and goes round and round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All the streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye has never seen enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything which one can say, look, this is something new? It was already long ago, and it was here before our time. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. So is that what you expected? A look back on life, some good advice on how to live? No, it's meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. I didn't really expect that from Solomon, but it's what it is. It doesn't take a Bible scholar to understand that as Solomon reflects back his life, it's a pretty dark, pessimistic, negative, nothing really matters kind of an attitude. He uses the word meaningless in this book 40 times. 40 times. Meaningless. What comes to your mind when you hear the word meaningless? Pointless, worthless. It's got, why even bother? So let's just go home and why even bother? That's what Solomon thinks. Ecclesiastes is really a reputation for being a hard book to understand, and some people don't read it because they think it's too hard. And listen to the opening statement that I read in two commentaries as I looked up Ecclesiastes. The New International Application Commentary said, it's best to be frank. Ecclesiastes is a difficult book. That really made me want to read on. So I don't know about you. The Expository's Bible Commentary said, Ecclesiastes is one of the most puzzling books in the Bible. Its apparently unorthodox statements and extreme pessimism caused its inclusion in the canon of scriptures to be questioned. They didn't even want to put this book in the Bible because it was so negative and so pessimistic. We don't want to hear that. But here it is. When the famous rock group Switchfoot, you heard Switchfoot, they did a whole album that was based on songs written from the book of Ecclesiastes. And Plugged In Resources actually gave it not a really good review because it said it was just too negative and pessimistic for young listeners. It was Ecclesiastes. I'm not sure what they were expecting. But that's what they said. But interestingly enough, by our standards, Solomon really had it all going for him. I read one guy that said Solomon was really the first American. He had it all. He had everything going for him. He had everything that the Americans pursue. But he had it all going for him, so why such a hopeless view of life? Especially after all the good advice that he'd offered in the book of Proverbs. He had all that positive things, all the things to remember, and life was really good, and he had all that in Proverbs, but what happened? Well, the belief is that Solomon wrote Ecclesiastes in the later years of his life, okay? When he was an old man and he was facing his mortality. When he looked at his pursuits and accomplishments, and then he realized, I'm just going to die anyway, and my stuff would be taken by others and used by others, and I'm probably just going to get forgotten about in the pages of history. I don't know, something happens when you get older and how you view life if you're not careful. So I want to take a real brief look at Solomon's life. I know Matt covered it and mentioned it, and Bart mentioned it, but I just kind of want to pull it all together here, because in Proverbs, this was a young Solomon. Now we're looking at kind of an old Solomon. So let's kind of remind ourselves about Solomon. And you can read this for yourself in 1 Kings 1 through 11 or 2 Chronicles 1 through 9. 2 Samuel 7 and 11 and 12 also mention about Solomon in there. There's really a lot written about Solomon. Here we go. His father was the great giant killer, David. And he was a man. David was a man after God's own heart. His beautiful mother was Bathsheba, who was married to another man whom David had killed to cover up their act of adultery. The prophet Samuel, when Solomon was born, even recorded that the Lord loved him. I thought that was kind of cool. I found that right there. The Lord loved him when he was born. And Solomon was chosen to be the king, even though he wasn't David's oldest son. He was chosen to be the king. God granted Solomon one wish for anything he desired, and Solomon chose wisdom, which really pleased God, and said, because of that, you'll have everything else. He was the master of innumerable subjects, and leaders from all over the earth came and visited him and inquire of him, and they bring him gifts. He wrote 3,000 proverbs. He wrote 1,005 songs, and he wrote 3 books in our Bible. His power was unparalleled as he reigned as king over Israel for roughly 40 years during a season of peace and prosperity. He oversaw the construction of God's temple and his own amazing palace. It took 20 years to build those 2 buildings. His hanging gardens were considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Amazing. He was a man of great wealth and possession, and his family life included 700 wives and 300 concubines. I'm not sure how wise that was, but that's what it was. He had all this stuff, but by the world standard, he had it all. But unfortunately, as he had gotten older in his life, he got distracted. The Bible tells us this in 1 Kings 11:4. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God as the heart of his father David. And it's most likely that Solomon wrote these words of Ecclesiastes during these years of his life. And it's really hard to be positive about life when you're not fully devoted to the giver of life. Ecclesiastes is a book on perspective and priorities. Solomon is just brutally honest with his assessment of human nature and the pursuit of worldly pleasures, especially when you leave God out of the equation. And Solomon knew. He knew that God was the source of life. He knew that God's ways are really the best way. He knew that it was without God, it was really difficult to see value in life. But he allowed himself to get distracted in his older years, and he did not finish well. I think in our world, that's something we've got to be careful of. I know we've got a lot of young people in this room, but we have a lot of older people, just like me. And as we get older, I think it's really important that we don't think we have it all together, that we base our opinions based not so much what we think of ourselves, but what God thinks of us. I think that's really important. Because as you get older and the things you used to love to do that you can't do anymore, or those kind of things, they kind of tend to make you look at your value, look at your value. I'm not as valuable because I couldn't do this, can't do this anymore, I can't do this anymore. But it's not about how you look at yourself, it's how God looks at us. And that's really important that we do that. It's important that we see life the way God sees life. Last Thursday, I went to the Ohio State Fair. Cindy and I, and Ashlyn and Everett, and Matthew, and Myron and Paul, we all got in a car and drove up to Columbus. Anybody been to the Ohio State Fair this year? Yeah. I grew up on the Iowa State Fair. I used to take my livestock there and was participated in when I was a 4-H guy. and enjoyed the Iowa State Fair. Lots of great things happened and a lot of great memories at the Iowa State Fair. And I'd always heard that the Ohio State Fair was pretty good too, and I was not disappointed. It was big. And I tell you what, I forgot all those smells that are at the State Fair, especially all that greasy food and all that stuff, people everywhere. But my favorite part actually was seeing the animals. I just loved walking around and seeing the animals. And we were walking around. There was just these pens that were set up outside the barns, and in these pens were some Guernsey dairy cows. And so you get a little closer look. You get up closer to them than maybe in the barns. And in one pen there was these two cute new baby calves. I mean, I know I'm going back, but there's really not much anything cuter than two baby calves. I'll tell you, they were really cute. You could touch them and pet them. It was really awesome. And then there was a couple other pens with some mama cows in there. And there was one pen that there was a mama cow in there that was getting ready to have a baby calf. That you could tell, at least I could tell. I don't know if you could have told or not, but I could tell. And she was about to have a calf. And I thought it was really interesting because around on the fence, around the cow, were these signs that said, "Stay back, I'm grumpy." Now, I thought that was good. And I thought, of all the people, I wonder who would I put that sign on? "Stay back, I'm grumpy." You know, there's something that about getting old that we got to be careful not to become grumpy. I love my grandparents, and my one grandfather, he would never let us win at checkers. But I couldn't believe that. But he was a great man. He was a good man. But, you know, I remember as he got old, he got grumpy. I sometimes I don't like the fact that that's kind of my memory of him got grumpy. But as we get older, I think we have to watch ourselves so that we don't become grumpy. Getting older can really mess with you if you're not careful because of the things. And I'm saying this to a lot of you young people so you can think about this as you get older. As you get older and things change, it's something you need to consider. Because, you know, it really is what it is. And I'm sure you've probably heard some of those when you're getting older when? You know you're getting older when you bend down to tie your shoes and you think, what else can I do while I'm down here? Or you know you're getting older when you're sitting at the breakfast table and you hear snap, crackle, pop and you're not eating cereal. You know you're getting older when it takes 2 tries to get out of the couch. You know you're getting older when you look for your glasses for a half hour and then find them on your head. You know you're getting older when you finally get your head together and your body falls apart. Or you know you're getting older if you have all the answer but nobody bothers to ask you the questions. You know, there's a whole bunch of them. But Solomon actually had, in the book of Ecclesiastes, he has his own little, you know you're getting older part. And it's actually at the end of the book. And so I kind of wanted to shift over and look at this because I think if you read this, it makes you understand a little bit more why he wrote some of the things he wrote. He was getting older and he was not in tune with God like he should be. But here it is. And he starts off with a really strong word of advice to everyone, especially to young people. He says this in Ecclesiastes 12, verse 1. Remember the Creator in the days of your youth. He of all things he said, he remembered that. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. Now, he's going to take this next section. As we read through this, I want you to kind of picture some images. He gives some images here about getting old, and you're going to have to kind of guess what they are. I read this in a commentary. I thought this was really clever, and it's kind of what it is. Here we go. He said, when you find no pleasure, before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars grow dark and the clouds return after the rain. Woe is me. When the keepers of the house tremble. Keepers of the house. What that's referring to is your skeleton. The idea of your limbs and your arms, when you start to tremble. And you get older and you start to tremble. When the keepers of the house, your arms and your legs. And the strong men stoop. Okay? I don't like it, but as you get older, things start happening. Your gravity works out in. Gravity is harsh, like I said. When the grinders cease because they are few. You got any idea what the grinders are? The teeth. When they are few, when the grinders are in trouble. And those looking through the windows grow dim. Anybody have to get glasses as they get older? I know some people have to get it older, but get younger, but at the same time, as you get older, that's part of it. Your eyes start getting dim. When the doors of the street are closed and the sound of grinding fades. This kind of has to do, and actually I'll go into when the people rise up at the sound of the birds and their songs grow faint. This has to do with your hearing. I mean, I've had to deal with that. It's not fun, but it's part of getting older. And the little devices, that's why I grow my hair long, so you can't see those little things in my ear, so I can hear you better. But at the same time, and it also says, when the rise up at the sound of birds. Now, how many of you older folks get up pretty early? Do you like getting up early? Or is it just because I'm already up, I can't go back to sleep? That happens as you get older, and there's different reasons why that happened. And when the people are afraid of heights. I know there's some people that are afraid of heights on the road, but it's funny. When we used to on the farm, when I grew up on the farm, I wondered why, as my dad got older, why he let me and my brother do all the climbing up to the silos or up to the barn. He just got to the point where getting up on a ladder bothered him. And I guess I should have let that bother me when I got in that tree that day, but it didn't yet. So I'm not there yet, okay? I don't mind that. And it says, and the dangers of the street. That just means you don't even like going out where people are. Where all those people out there, it kind of bothers you. Really, the state fair really had a lot of people. I really like looking at the animals, but there are a lot of people there. And sometimes you just kind of find yourself going, okay, I just need a break. I just need a break from all the people here. Okay. That happens as you get older. And then it says, when the almond tree blossoms. Would you like to know what color an almond tree blossom is? Yes, it's white. That happens. When the almond tree, when the hair starts turning white. And the grasshopper drags itself along, and the desire is no more stirred. Your desire just is different as you get older. I'm not going to go there. But it says, then people go to their eternal home, and mourners go about the street. And remember him before the silver cord is severed, which is talking about your spine. The golden bowl is breaking, which is talking about your head. And before the pitcher is shattered, which is talking about your heart. And the wheel broken at the well, which is talking about your internal organs. And the dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Meaningless, meaningless, says a teacher. Everything is meaningless. He did not like getting old. And that was affecting him. And it was changing his view towards life. And the reality is, it's something we all are dealing with. We're all getting older. That's life. You either keep having birthdays or you don't have birthdays. The real question is not if you're going to die, it's how are you going to live. The last time I checked, the mortality rate in this world is still 100%. And I believe that when you face the reality of your death, of your mortality, then you truly can appreciate the gift of life that God has given you. I'll never forget, we used to live in Colorado, and we had our church camp up in the mountains near Como, Colorado, and it was a little ghost town basically, but there was a cemetery there, and at night we would sneak out. We did. We just snuck out and go visit the cemetery, okay, and kind of scare the kids and all that kind of stuff. And I found a tombstone there that was been there since like 1890. And there must have been some plague up there in the 1890s in Como that wiped out a lot of people because there was children in all different ages. But there was this one tombstone. It was a very old tombstone, and it made this. It had this saying on it. It said, "Remember me as you pass by, as you are now, so once was I. As I am now, soon you will be. Prepare for death and follow me." Now that gets you real excited about visiting people in a graveyard, you know. That's what he's saying. It's almost like he's taunting, you know. But you know, it is something we all have to deal with. You know, it's important for us to decide how we're going to live our life. Are we going to live our life understanding that God has given us the gift of life, or are we going to live our life for ourselves? God will let you choose. And God will let you live your life on your own. He will let you do that. He's not going to make you follow him. If you choose to do life on your own, he will say, okay. But if you at any moment, like the prodigal son, come to your senses and return home, he will be there in a moment. And he will take you in, and he will guide you, and he will lead you, and he will make your life worth living. One of Solomon's greatest accomplishments was when he built the temple for the Lord so that God could dwell among his people, was the idea. His father David really wanted to be the one to build the temple, but the Lord made it clear it wasn't going to be David, it was going to be Solomon. Solomon was going to build his temple. And it was an amazing and impressive building made from the finest materials from all over the known world. It was one of his greatest accomplishments, even though later he said it was meaningless, I guess. But when the temple was finished, Solomon stood there in front of the altar and he looked out over the great assembly of the Israelites and he prayed and called out to God. And here's part of that prayer as he talked about the temple. And he said, but will God really dwell on the earth? The heavens, even the highest heavens cannot contain you. How much less this temple I have built. Yet give attention to your servant's prayer and his plea for mercy. Lord my God, hear the cry and the prayer that your servant is praying in your presence this day. May your eyes be open towards this temple day and night, this place of which you said, my name shall be there, so that you will hear the prayer of your servant's that prays towards this place. Well, to answer Solomon's question, you'd actually have to say, yes, God really can dwell on this earth. Because about 1,000 years later, a little baby was born in a little town of Bethlehem, and God was with us. He grew up. He lived his life. He loved on people. He talked to people. He was killed. He died on a cross. He was rose again. He lived in this world. He actually visited that temple. Now, it was a rebuilt temple at this point because the temple had been destroyed during one of the invasions, but they had rebuilt it. Jesus, God himself, through Jesus, walked into that temple and taught people, helped people. He actually even chased away the money changers in that temple because they were defiling his Father's house. And at his death, the curtain in that temple was torn from top to bottom, symbolizing that now God would dwell among men. Not out there, not in this building, but here, in our lives. Which would give us real hope and give us real meaning. And when you put your faith in Jesus, because it's really all about Jesus. Even Solomon didn't quite get that yet because he was before him, but he knew that he was coming. He knew that God had a plan, but it's all about him. And faith is really the key. You know, Solomon's father, King David, in the book of Hebrews, where they give this long list of all the people who lived by faith, King David was in that list. Solomon was not on that list. All the great accomplishments that Solomon had, all the wisdom that he had been given by God, did not get him on that list. Because as he got older, his love for God began to fade. We need to do everything we can to guard our hearts and not let our love for God fade. I've told you about my dad has been gone now for 23 years. He lost a battle to cancer and when he was 64 years old, which, wow, I'm really close to that now, and it really does make me stop and think. I remember talking to him at the end of his life, and he had some good things to say, and actually his faith during that time inspired me. It helped me see the reality of death and helped me commit to living my life as a life of faith. But I remember him saying, I don't know what people who don't have faith in God do in times like this. That's what he'd say. And I've heard several people in this room and people who are friends that have gone on before say the very same thing as life was beating them up. I don't know what people without God do in times like this. As a matter of fact, I was sitting on the porch with Joe Sturgeon last Sunday night. Tina had just died the day before and went over to see him. We were just sitting there, and he told me, he said, I thought I was prepared for this, but I really not as prepared as I thought. It happens. It's really kind of a shocking thing. But his faith, he said, the hope of heaven helps me get through this. He said, knowing that she's in heaven, and I hope I can be with her someday. That hope is so important and so strong. Life has more meaning when you trust the one who gave us life. I remember going to see Ray Springer, who just passed away not too long ago, and still fresh in my mind. But I'd go see him with some of the guys in my group, and he would sit there and say, I am not afraid to die. My faith in God is strong. I am not afraid to die. Can you look at life that way? Because what it does is it gives you the freedom to live your life in a more powerful way than you can even imagine. When you realize that this isn't where it's all at. And that's what Solomon was trying to say. This is all meaningless compared to this. And this is how he wrapped up his book. And we're going to go into this deeper this month. And I hope you'll be here every week to hear what Bart has to say. But here's the conclusion. Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of God.